Hello, and welcome to Five for Friday for this Friday, March 4th. Some of the stories that stood out to me this week, we'll talk about them in 5 different categories. Let's start with cybersecurity, typically an issue that big businesses worry about more so than us small businesses, but things are trickling down to the small business world. So be sure that you have password protections in place as well as dual authentication wherever possible. As a matter of fact, the invasion by Russia into the Ukraine has actually made things less secure and more likely to be, broken into. So be sure that you're on the lookout for that and take a look at the newsletter where there's a nice link to a review of different password managers for individuals and small businesses. Story number 2 has to do with climate change. The United Nations released a report this week talking about where we are with climate change and what's being affected. And the news was not good. It showed up in multiple news stories talking about the potential for having an irreversible impact in some cases. The other news story was, of course, that in California, they had the driest first 2 months in the recorded history of California. So there are concerns about wildfires and water shortages there. Some people are trying to do things to address this, including Bill Gates, who has an investment fund, recognizing that a lot of new technology to address climate change needs time to build up to be profitable. And so there are funds to help attract people into that area. And a treaty that was formed to agree to address plastics and start to try to reduce the use of plastics and limit the recycling of them. Then on to story number 3, 3D printing is becoming more and more of a thing. We've talked about it at Five for Friday before with concrete and building houses. What stood out this week was 3D printing or additive printing using metals, including stainless steel and aluminum. So that could be a really interesting thing to consider if you do any kind of an industrial work that involves metal. Is this going to be the wave of the future for that? And of course, the other more futuristic discussion of 3D printing was the ability to print human muscle fiber using something called cryobioprinting. So it's frozen as it gets printed. Very interesting, but still very much being explored. Topic number 4 has to do with logistics and all the changes that we're seeing come to light, mostly related to changes in energy and changes related to how things get delivered, including testing going on in Arkansas right now for drone delivery by Walmart to deliver things right to your house. And then when we talk more about the logistics of delivery, also an investment in battery-powered train engines to save on the diesel that trains typically use to power their engines. And then finally, a huge investment in self-driving trucks. Now, these trucks are really only capable of driving on highways. So the other investment is in land near interstates and big cities so that the self-driving trucks can be transferred to a truck driver to finish the last mile. So apparently lots of money going into that right now. So keep an eye out for that in terms of logistics and delivery. And then finally, story number 5 has to do with hiring, which I know has been a hot button issue for some time. And some of the things that stood out to me related to that. One was information on what a huge shortage we have in childcare workers, which is really impacting people's ability to get a job if they don't have childcare. Next is competing against big tech, who is now finding that one of the best ways to recruit people is with huge cash bonuses, something small businesses have a harder time doing. But people are not as happy with retail and other organizations that are hiring you with the premise of it being full-time and then only keeping you on random part-time hours. Again, these big businesses like Walmart or Amazon want to make sure all the hours get covered. And so they overhire and a lot of people are left without working full-time. So again, as a small business, think about what your potential employees are looking for in the job and how can you meet those needs. And then an interesting story about the bond between humans and robots in work and how that could impact the interplay that's going on at work. And then, of course, the fact that our Gen Z, our youngest and new workers to the workforce, might find that they don't ever actually work in an office. And how will that impact their professional careers? So some interesting things to think about related to the future of hiring. So those are my stories for this week. I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week on 5 for Friday.